Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. Today, we will be talking about the brothers of skinwalkers, the Wendigos. Let's get right into it. But before we do, make sure you subscribe and like, because if you do not, I will send the Wendigos after you. And now, buckle up. And always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
So, what are Wendigos? In some traditions, humans that were overpowered by greed could turn into Wendigos. The myth thus served as a method of encouraging cooperation and moderation. Other sources say Wendigos were created when a human resorted to cannibalism to survive. Humans could also turn into Wendigos by being in contact with them for too long. So these were the three theories as to how Wendigos came about. Let's look at three stories now that contain Wendigos. Number one, first encounter. Hello again. As I have seen some of you wanted to hear the stories I have to tell. I have one too many to post in just one paragraph, so I'll chop them up and let you guys decide whether or not you want more. I live in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania that is surrounded by farms and endless forests. As a kid, I spent most of my time fishing for trout or building stick forts. Now I have bonfires and I deer hunt. So as you can imagine, I'm outside most of the time. At this point, I know almost every paw print or call of the local animals, and I can identify it almost immediately. At the age of 13, I went over to one of my friend's houses for his birthday party, mid-June, alongside another two guys. We used to hang out a lot, but after this incident, things happened and we broke apart and went our own ways. Anyways, we were crazy and imagining exploring abandoned places and finding paranormal spirits as all the YouTubers did at the time. About 3 miles into the forest, there was an abandoned quarry. All of us were excited to explore it, so we got the birthday boy, his name is Aiden, to lie to his dad and say we were going for a walk through the woods. Aiden's dad said yes, but to not wander off too far, and to pay attention to the trees due to the number of mountain lion sightings in the area recently. Many say they don't live here in Pennsylvania, said to be a boogeyman of sorts, but I've seen one with my own eyes and I can tell you they're here, along with wolves. We gear up and grabbed our phones and knives. Well, at the time I didn't have a knife, but I borrowed one from one of the big guys. His name was Clayton, and he's a little out of shape, putting it nicely. He usually brought up to 10 knives to our parties like some sort of serial killer. Sometimes he made me worry. He also gave one to our fourth guy named Marcellus. More ghetto than country boy, but it's okay, we got along at the time. As we packed our bags and got ready, we poked fun at each other. Me insulting Aiden's choice of footwear, wearing a pair of black and white Vans, while the rest of us wore boots. Clayton poking fun at me for being the smallest guy in the group, and Marcellus backing up Clayton's insults. As we headed out the door, excited for what we were going to find in the amazing abandoned quarry, imagining old mine shafts deep in the ground where coral was mined or copper, the air seemed to change. Change as in heavier, like when a kid in class threatens to kill everyone in the room. Yeah, that kind of heavy. Almost a primitive fear. As I eerily looked around, curious about what installed this primitive fear into my system. The others talked about what we were going to find. I think we are going to find some coal. Maybe we can sell it to some local farmer, commented Clayton in an almost wishful sort of way. It's a quarry, dumbass, not a mine shaft, yelled Aiden, furious with Clayton's idiotic comment. Aiden had a tendency to get angry over the stupidest of mistakes. Even a misspoken word was enough to set him off. Same thing, mine shaft, quarry, your mum's, all things worth exploring, Clayton said in a mocking tone. Shut the up before I rock your world, fat, Aiden yelled in rage, almost about to throw a fist and knock his teeth out. As Marcellus calmed down both of them down, I zoned out. As we were walking into the woods, now after going through a long field, the feeling of dread was getting stronger, and I almost wanted to run. I knew I was being watched. I always know when someone stares at me in class. I usually look directly at them when I notice the feeling. I started to scan my surroundings. Maple trees, rocks, cliffs, bones, birds, beehives. Wait, bones? I backtracked to where I seen bones and looked a little closer. About 60 yards away, at the bottom of a cliff, was a dead deer. Fresh blood still on its bones, flesh hanging from its skull. I imagined the thing that could have mutilated it so badly and thought of a 1,000-pound black bear with rabies. Honestly, now I wish it just was a bear. Hey, dipstick, I'm talking to you, Clayton pegged me with a rock and broke my trance. What do you want, man? I said, clearly annoyed. I said, what the hell are you looking at? Clayton barked, irritated that I didn't respond sooner. Nothing. Come on, let's get going. Still another 2.5 miles till we reach the quarry. Nothing exciting happened as we climbed a large hill. I felt the air get heavier and my primal fear clawing its way up my spine as if it's about to dig itself out. Once we reached the top of the hill, there was a level part still filled with maple and birch trees and some decent sized rocks. There was a barbed wire fence that led to a clearing, freshly mowed like a field. Aiden commented, saying that was his property and his neighbor probably was trespassing again. As we got to the fence, I noticed something red hanging from the fence. A rag or piece of clothing covered in dried blood, and underneath it was a rusted old knife with a saw blade on one side and a sharp edge on the other. Me and Marcellus argued for a minute about who got the knife, and I gave in and let him have it. We crawled under the fence and walked through the field. Right now we were only about half a mile away from the quarry. I zoned out again as we walked. No one was talking about anything exciting anyway, and I scanned my surroundings when my fear jumped, almost right out of me. I couldn't place it as I frantically looked around. Something bad, no, something evil was nearby and I could sense it. I was at the back of the line so no one noticed my panic. I went tree to tree, scanning for something out of place, and when I got to a birch tree, roughly 25 yards away, I saw it. There was a large, lengthy, grey hand wrapped around the tree. I could almost make out claws. I looked up above the hand and I could just barely see the edge of a head. I looked at my friends who got a little bit ahead of me, looked back at the tree and the grey thing was gone. I ran to catch up with my friends, deciding to keep what I just saw quiet so I'm not made fun of for the rest of the weekend. We finally started to see a clearing up ahead with another barbed wire fence. We walked through a patch of thorn bushes about as tall as me, and they shredded our bare torsos as we took off our shirts and hung them from our shoulders. We crouched under the fence and made it to the quarry. Now, almost 50 years later, it was just some old cow pasture. We were a little bummed out as we were hoping for the ultimate mineshaft experience, but we knew logically what we would find. There was this cool little part where the rock was cut out, leaving a 10-foot drop below to the cow pasture. We went over there and screwed around on the cliff. It was roughly 100 yards away from the tree line, so we were a little far from the woods. There was a pallet with some perfect cut square rocks in it, and we looked through them, fascinated by how precise they were. But in the end, we just left them. Aiden got the idea to take some Instagram pictures, and as we got into position to take photos for our pages, Aiden, we all spun around towards the far woods, hearing his dad, but it was off, almost mechanical. Startled by how quiet it was, almost a whisper, but the woods were 100 yards away. My fear crawled its way into me, and I wanted to go home, knowing something was wrong. Guys, we need to go, I stated, walking towards the tree line. The others followed. My fear grew stronger and stronger. I scanned the field, then the cliff, then the trees. As I was walking, we were at the tree line, scrambling under the fence. Snap! A branch cracked not too far from us. We all looked. Marcella still under the fence, and we saw it. 20 yards away was this 9-foot human-like animal. No, not animal. It stood on two legs like a human. Its grey skinny arms ended at its knees, and its claws were as big as its hands. It was partially crouched, perching its elbows on its knees, staring at us with its hot red eyes. Teeth stuck out of its mouth like a piranha with large canines like a dog. Its teeth were an ugly yellowish and blackish colour, with some bloodstain on its top row. We all stood, frozen and staring at this beast. Then its eyes snapped to me. It made eye contact and twitched. In fear, I let out a gasp. Its eyes perked up as it heard this, as if in pleasure. It slowly stood up, breaking my trance, and I jumped into flight mode. "Run!" I screamed, making a dash for home. The field only 50 yards away, the creature let out an almost metallic, human, bear-like roar. Its scream filled me with fear, and I could sense the hate in its veins. This monster was primal fear. We ran like hell as it chased after us, dodging left and right, changing direction, tripping it up so it can't catch us. We dove under the barbed wire fence and kept running. I looked back to see it hurdle the fence like it was nothing. Hot on our heels, running on all fours, I tripped over a branch and rolled, catching myself and kept running. But this put me at the back of the line. I felt its hot breath on my back as it ran. It let out another scream, and I jumped off the nearby cliff to my right. My friends did the same. It was only a 15-foot drop onto some dead leaves and grass, so we landed somewhat nicely, except I rolled my ankle in the process and Aiden landed his knee on a rock. I looked back and saw I almost landed on the deer corpse from earlier, and that gave me a spark of renewed energy. The tree line was only 300 yards away, and we ran like hell. We heard a screeching and scrambling down the hill at full speed. We vaulted over rocks and slid under fallen trees, and this thing was right on us the whole time, teeth bared and roaring in hatred. I knew the only goal this abomination had was to mutilate us like the deer. We ran and ran. Then it roared again, this time sounding almost in defeat. We cleared the tree line and ran to the road. We turned back around to see where it was, and it stood in the tree line, almost out of view, but still visible enough to see it. "Even," it croaked in a voice so unnatural and satanic, almost like the demons in movies, but more metallic. I didn't mention this before, but my name is Even. My friends always call each other mean things, so we rarely said our real names. Instead of primal fear, this time I felt primal rage. I puffed out my chest and slammed my hands on my pecs. "You want a piece of me, you ugly son of a—" "Come at me," I screamed, a little unsettled by my primal outburst. This thing simply smiled, turned around and walked away. We all looked at each other and went back to the house. Aiden's dad didn't hear the scream, so we had to explain nothing. We went and hid in his room in silence. None of us really talked about it much except for me. If I was to ask them now about it, they would probably say it was just a bear and that we overreacted. But I'm telling you now, there was more to come to prove suspicious. At least to me. So that was part 1. Leave a comment if you want to hear more stories. Number 2. Fear in the woods. This story is 100% true, and I'm writing it on here to warn other people and let them know that there's definitely something out there. And to this day, I still don't know what it was, nor have I gone into any woods or forests whatsoever. If you don't believe me, that's completely fine. Read this as a fun story at your own expense. But for those of you out there with an open mind, or you've seen something yourself, just know you're not alone. And just typing it out and remembering this account is causing me to shake with anxiety and fear. First off, I am a girl and live in North Carolina of the United States. I was 15 at the time of my encounter and was definitely not a believer in anything supernatural, paranormal, or anything of the sort. It happened while I was at the local summer camp. There was absolutely nothing special about that day. No weird lights, people, animals, sounds, nothing. It was just the same camp schedule as I'd grown used to in the past 2 weeks I'd been there. My age group had just finished lunch and was able to persuade our counselor to let us play a game called Scatter Down by the Lake. It's like a giant hide and seek in the woods. Now, we had played this at least 20 times before that day, and nothing weird had happened to any of us, and we all grew up playing in the woods, so it's not like we had an aversion of fear of it. But for some reason that day, when our counselor shouted scatter and I ran to find a hiding place, it became a whole new ball game. I had run as far as I could while still being able to see the lake, as were the rules, and had found a large old uprooted tree that I decided would be the perfect hiding place. So I lay down as close as I could against the ground and waited. I had been there for about 5 minutes when I suddenly heard a voice calling my name in a weird, dreamy-like voice, and not just any voice, my mum's. Now, me and my mum are extremely close, thick as thieves, so I'd know her voice anywhere, and I would swear on my own grave that it was without a doubt hers. But I knew it couldn't be her. She was 20 miles away at work, and even if it had actually been her, and she'd come to pick me up early, the voice wasn't coming from the lake. It was coming further out in the woods, beyond the border of the camp. I knew I should have run away from this strange mimic mum voice, but I couldn't. It was almost hypnotic. It messed with my thoughts and gave me doubts like, well, it could be mum, or what if she's hurt and I have to get to her? All these things were flooding into my mind like someone had broken a dam I didn't know was there, until they finally overwhelmed me and emotion got the better of me and I took off running in the direction the voice was coming from. I ran as fast as I could, with only this strange voice as my guide. I couldn't have run for more than 5 or 7 minutes when I got to the clearing and the voice suddenly stopped. When I entered the clearing and didn't hear my mum's voice calling me anymore, I finally thought clearly again and started to have little alarm bells go off inside my head saying, "You idiot," or "That's not mum," and run. But I couldn't run. I didn't know where to run. I had gotten so far away, I had lost sight of the lake by camp and had absolutely no idea where I was. and I was completely exhausted to boot. With no other options than to sit and catch my breath, I did just that. No sooner I sat down, more warning bells went off in my mind. I quickly did a 360 survey around the clearing and noticed a strange noise. It wasn't the continuation of the voice before. No, it was the distinct sound of chattering teeth, like if you were cold. Only there was no one else around, and it was the middle of June in North Carolina. There's no way someone could be cold. And that's when I heard it. Leaves and sticks crunch on the edge of the small clearing, and I realized something was watching me. And then whatever it was moved and fast in circles around the clearing, almost like it was circling prey. And it was at that moment I knew whatever it was had led me out there, away from the rest of my group, exactly like the predator. My instincts had been screaming at me that it was. Without any other option other than to try and escape, I took off in the direction I thought I came from and sprinted as fast as I could, all the while hearing the chittering of teeth and sticks crunching behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't dare turn around, see what was chasing me. I knew that if I did, I would slow down, and I absolutely would not. It felt like a lifetime running away from this thing before I finally saw the lake, and even though I didn't think I could, I ran faster than I ever have in my life. When I broke the tree line, I ran to the lake where I knew my friends were. At that point, I felt safe enough to stop and look back and see just what had been chasing me. But when I did, I only saw a fleeting form running back the way I had come, and the distinct sound of chittering teeth. When I finally found my counselor, I was hysterical with fear and hugged her as tight as I could. When I finally calmed down, she tried to get me to tell her what happened, but I just asked, "Why are you calling my name?" Before she even said anything, I already knew the answer. After all, it had been my mum's voice that led me away from everyone else. But what she replied with, was so much more bone-chilling to me. She told me, "No one called for you. We didn't know you were gone. Everyone is still hiding. The game isn't over yet." Number 3. Wendigo in Wisconsin. This is still hard for me to wrap my head around because it shook me to my core. But this story takes place just over a year ago, in late November 2018. I live in a rural suburban in SEWI, near a line of woods and ponds. My town is small and everything is silent and dark by 9 p.m. I tend to walk my dog after dinner and before bed, and my town is pretty safe, so walking her in the dark never fazed me until this. I live in an apartment complex that is on the end of a residential street, so most of the street is older houses. One night I was walking my dog around 10:30 p.m. I think, when I saw something on the front lawn of one of these houses. They didn't have a light on their front porch, so most of their lawn was dark. But with lights from the surrounding houses, I could see a figure standing in the middle of their lawn. It was very tall and skinny, almost as tall as the roof of their ranch house, because even standing in the middle of the front yard, it looked almost as tall as the house. It was standing on its hind legs, but had antlers or some type of tall ears like a bunny, and its arms and legs were abnormally long and stretched to the bone. The moment I saw it, my body froze, and I had that feeling that you only get when you're near immediate danger or evil. So this tall, lanky creature is standing there, and I can't see its face, but by its positioning, I know it has noticed me. Also, my dog, who is normally aware of every living creature from a mile away in a snowstorm, is completely unaware of its presence. It felt like longer, but it was only a few seconds before this creature jumped straight up in the air. And I mean straight up, not forward, and bounded to the back of the house in 3 large strides. It didn't make a sound, and the way it jumped and moved was unlike any animal I've ever seen. The closest I would akin to it would be a deer, and it was on its hind legs, and had the body features of a stretched out human, but with antlers or tall ears. I felt stuck, and almost hypnotized by the whole thing, but came to my senses enough to call attention to my dog, and turned around to head for home. Behind all of the houses on this side of the street is woods, and some of the trees wrap around between this house and the neighboring house, coming back towards home. We turned around, my eyes glued to the trees, and when we got to the middle of the houses, I could see 2 eyes watching me through the 2 houses. The presence and overall weight of the feeling this whole encounter gave me still sticks with me as clearly as the night it happened. I can remember it all so vividly and still feel the weight. Ever since that night, I've been thinking about it and running through all of the possibilities of what it could be, but always coming up with no explanation. It wasn't until about a month ago that I was watching a special on supernatural encounters that I heard about wendigos. The description fit perfectly and made my blood run even colder. I'm fully convinced that what I saw that night had to have been a wendigo. I made a point to only walk my dog during the daylight during the summer months, and on the connecting street that is the main road of my town, that is at least lit with streetlights in the winter when it gets dark before I'm even home from work. Since that night, I haven't had any other direct encounter with it, except one event that I'm not sure is related, but feels the same feeling of being watched. Across from my apartment complex, there is a small pond surrounded by trees. A few weeks ago, my brother was over and he was outside smoking when he came in quickly and locked the door behind him. I had mentioned my encounter to him when it first happened, but he shrugged it off like most people I told, and likely didn't give it a second thought. He looked shaken and kept looking through the peephole in my door and not saying anything. He finally got out that he was outside smoking and heard loud dragging and rustling sounds coming from the wooded pond area. He said he was listening for about a minute and thought he caught a glimpse of something very tall near the tree line. He described it as a sound they would make if someone were dragging a heavy animal or body through rough brush woods, and he had a feeling of dread and heaviness, like he couldn't look away and was being honed in on by something. Normally, I'm the type of person that would go out and look for myself, maybe even going down by the pond to explore and find something, but this case shuts all of that down. There's something viscerally evil about this creature that not even I care to explore further. I've tried telling people in my life about all of this, but as most people do with this type of stuff, none of them really put any stock into it, except my brother now that he's had this experience. I'm of the mind that things beyond our comprehension and everyday scope absolutely do exist, and this is one I won't be messing with or going on adventures to see again. Legends and beliefs exist for a reason, and this is one I don't want to mess with. So Wendigo in my neighborhood, let's not meet. I will now be reviewing the stories and mentioning the authors of the stories. So the first story is called First Encounter, and it was uploaded by Agent 11776. This story looks like it plays like a novel, to be honest. It doesn't sound real to me. I'm going to be honest with you. The way it's written, I feel like it's written in a way that wants the reader to think the author is an actual author. If you, I don't know if you get what I'm trying to get at, but I think you kind of understand, because the way he describes everything, the way there's quite a lot of dialogue in this, the way he described, maybe he's just a good author, I guess. There were some mistakes in it, so but I think it was good. It was a good story. I'm not saying it was not scary, but I'm saying I wouldn't believe it as true. It's a scary story. It was it was good. It was beautifully written to a certain extent. I did enjoy reading it. I would give it a 7 out of 10. Actually, I think I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It was a good story about Wendigos. I did enjoy it. Now, the second story was by May1400, and the name was Fear in the Woods. Now, this is basically a cliche hide and seek scary story where they go hide and seek, and then they hear voices, and then they follow the voice, and then it turns out to be a Wendigo or skinwalker. Because I think for some reason I feel like skinwalkers and Wendigos are kind of similar. They have similar supernatural powers, meaning mimicking voices, for example, and also like changing, shifting shapes and stuff. So I feel like they are kind of similar. So this is why I think the same. Maybe they are, maybe not, or maybe I'm wrong. But this story was very scary. I enjoyed reading it, especially that there's a new twist on hide and seek. It's called Scatter. I didn't know about this. Well, if you guys play, comment down below if you actually play a game called Scatter, because this is the first time I'm hearing about it. But it sounds very interesting and fun to play, and because of that, I give this a 9 out of 10. Now, the Wendigo in Wisconsin, this was really good. This I don't think it was a real story. I feel like I mean I don't think this was a real story, meaning a fictional story. It feels like a true story, meaning this actually happened. The way she describes everything, and it's actually I really enjoyed reading it, to be honest, and especially with the fact that there's something in the forest that's doing things because her brother saw something. So I feel like it makes it more creepy and eerie, that there's something that people, I bet a lot of people have heard something, but they don't say anything. They regard it as maybe an animal, but maybe there are a lot of things happening in the neighborhood that that people are just saying it's animals or something, when really it's not. So this makes it more eerie, like there's a big evil in the woods, don't go near it. It's like one of those kind of stories. This is why I would give this a 10 out of 10. And now I'm going to let Mr. Midnight do the outro.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope these stories frightened you and scared you of Wendigos. But remember, I am more scarier than them. I will see you very soon. So until then, love the darkness as it always follows.